There, I've pressed record. And so welcome to everyone that is just coming in. Some people still in the waiting room. I'm just admitting everyone. So my name's Rebecca Jones. I'm a proud member of LMD for about 100 years, actually only 40. And delighted that Rebecca is going to be talking with us today. I just want to go through a bit of housekeeping. As you can probably tell, I have hardly any voice, so Rebecca is going to be very gracious, as she always is, and introduce herself. But in terms of housekeeping, first of all, apologies that we had a bit of a Zoom glitch. I know some of you were trying to register. I hope you've, obviously you've gotten the message that you could get in no matter what, and that we will be recording this and putting it, publishing it to the LMD site for LMD members to have free. If you're not an LMD member, then of course we want you to be an LMD member, and as an LMD member, you will have all of our webinars and discussions on Zoom for free. I am just now making sure that everyone is on mute. That's only to make sure that we are managing the logistics of this. We are expecting about 50 people. I think that says this is a popular topic. And, but I will be taking you off mute when we go into some discussion. And because of course we want as much as possible for this to be interactive. I have completed an international course using Zoom where people from all over the world, we were completely interactive on Zoom, including with the instructor. So I know it works very well. What else I want to say? You will see up at the top of your screen, there is a place where you can raise your hand if you need to get my attention. And I also strongly encourage you to please use the chat. You'll see the chat at the bottom. It says chat. Just click on there and away we go. So I think that's it for logistics. If I've forgotten anything, I'm sure somebody will raise your hand. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who's going to introduce herself and how she's come to thinking very deeply about solution-driven services.
Thank you, Rebecca, and for all participants. We are both Rebecca. You're not sort of hearing echoes and double. There's two Rebeccas on. I'll go through, and to Rebecca Jones, do feel free to come in if at any point you want to stop, for I'll pause for discussion, but by all means, under your leadership. My background is specifically with librarianship in current awareness, and I actually worked on the vendor side. I worked with a software platform for a number of years, about a dozen years, in fact, selling to private libraries, primarily special libraries in general, but mainly corporate and legal libraries. And what the dichotomy that I was exposed to there was the fact that I was in a small business, and I was running, we were effectively a small business selling to large businesses, of course. And I also would work with my clients to build business cases for purchasing our software. It was an enterprise solution, and there was a lot that went into that. And I got to see both sides of current awareness. I got to see both sides of strategic positioning as well, for our own business and how we positioned ourselves, and for libraries and what it meant to position a library strategically within the greater organization. I now consult on strategic positioning, both for small businesses and for information departments. And the similarities there are the fact that an information department is very much like a small business within the larger organization. The only difference is the information department has one client with a capital C, which is the organization as a whole. But a lot of what goes into understanding how to present oneself with a value-driven message is really very, very similar in terms of approach. So, and that's the topic we're tackling today, of course, solution-driven services. And what we're differentiating between is a service that is solution-driven rather than task-driven. So when a service is driven by its solution, by the solution that it provides, then it is all about value. And that's what we want to be focusing on today. The difficulty is that value, much like beauty, is fully in the eye of the beholder. So the best, the most credible, the most vetted and accessible content in the world will mean nothing to me or to a client if I don't have time to read that content, or if I don't know what to do with it, if I don't know what it means, and so on and so forth. Now, the most common concern I've heard from libraries is the difficulty that libraries have in getting a seat at the table, and I mean the table with a capital T. It's the difficulty in being present when big projects and big decisions are being discussed within your organization. And for as long as I've been involved in the library world, this is a struggle that I've been hearing about and discussing. The libraries struggle to be acknowledged and to be really understood in terms of the value being provided. What we've seen, as I say, in the 12 to now 14, 15 years that I've been involved in libraries, what we've seen is big progress in terms of positioning the library and diversifying the services themselves. The step that we're dealing with now to really finalize this process is how to communicate the key value of the library. It's getting that information across. Information teams and libraries, of course, know the key value of what they're doing. But here's the thing, until your clients see your key value and they understand your key value, those invitations to that table with a capital T are not going to happen. So what are we learning today? We're going to go through three key areas. We're going to look at shifting from what to why. So moving from a description of what you do to a description of why you do it. We're going to talk about what clients want. And in particular, we're going to differentiate between what clients need versus what they want and why that distinction is important. And then we're going to take all this information and turn it into your value proposition with the pillars of service approach, the pillars of service that a library presents internally. I always like to start with a core idea. If you take away only one thing from this entire presentation, let it be your new business mantra, which is, it's not me, it's you. And as I say, this is your mantra. So this is what you are saying when you are facing a client or a stakeholder, your customers, your reporting line, whoever it is that you're communicating with. If you picture them in front of you and say, it's not me, it's you, then you're focused on what they're doing there and what they get out of things. So carry this through how you work, carry this through the decisions that you make, how you report, etc. So starting with the simple part, which is what do you do? Let's start with what you know. And we're going to talk about what you do versus why, and the difficulty that you probably have in describing these differences because you're so embedded in your work, the value is obvious to you. And the point is not that librarians struggle to create this differentiation. The point is that everybody does. Anything that is our craft, we struggle to explain what the value is of that craft because it's so obvious to us. It's very hard for us to break out of our own paradigm and our own point of view. So if we start with looking at what you do, we're going to go through this webinar and shift all of these into why you do it. So some very standard answers as to what does a librarian do? Well, a librarian collects and optimizes and I should say delivers or disseminates information. So far, so straightforward. This is quite literally what a librarian in pretty much any environment does. Another description I come across is some version of a librarian offers support to the knowledge economy. So here we're seeing a little bit of a focus on who you're serving, the knowledge economy. It's a bit more of a feeling of why. Creates alerts and research. So here literally we're talking about the product, the deliverable that librarians produce. And for last, I've left my absolute favorite answer, which is a librarian works in a library, defined by the location. This is always a great answer to that. Now you'll notice we've got 4 answers here. Again, this isn't every answer to the question, but it's 4 common versions of the answer. And each one is different. We've got something a little bit more concrete, so collects and optimizes what a librarian does. Something more abstract, offers support, not very descriptive. And then we've got something that targets specific products, so alerts and research. But what none of these answers does is explain a solution. Not a single one of these answers is solution driven. So the problem is none of these answers passes what I call the so what test. Now this is a test I put all of my clients through, asking so what essentially about everything that you do. The so what test determines what's in it for somebody else. Why does somebody else care? Why does it matter to your audience? But the problem isn't with the answers. The problem is very much with the question. We shouldn't be asking what you do. We should be asking why you do it. So for ourselves, we shouldn't be saying, what do I do every day? We should be saying, why do I do this every day? Why is this my output? The why question, the answer to the why question answers the so what question. The why really describes why people are hiring you and why you are paid and why people trust you and why people find value in your service. Why explains value. So we've looked at what you do. Let's try to turn that around and think about why you do. Now, I do a talk that is similar in approach to this when I'm working with small businesses. And in that environment, it's called Nobody Wants to Buy Your Service. Because, and this is true, of course, within the librarian world as well, people don't buy what you do. People buy the outcome of what you do. So people don't come to you for the thing that you do. They come to you for the result of the thing that you do. It's never content for the sake of content. And we have to understand it is content for the sake of what, so to speak. So what is it for the sake of? We can look at a sort of standard sequence of a stakeholder or customer interacting with you. Your client has an issue, a problem, a concern. They have an obstacle that they have to overcome or a decision to make. And you provide a service or a deliverable. You provide information, you provide alerts, and that's where you come in to support or to assist when overcoming this obstacle. When your clients then apply that service or that deliverable to their own work, they use the deliverable in some way, they come out the other end with a better outcome, that they are successful at that stage. This is the solution. So this is what your clients are driving towards at all times. You're working in the step before this happens, but really this step is where value reveals itself, this last step here. When the client has applied the thing that you've provided and they are seeing success, where they see a good outcome and they ultimately are happy. So the outcome, the success or the value is really happening after you've left the room. That's when your stakeholders and your clients are getting the benefit of what you do. So this is the why, and this is what matters to your clients. It's the thing that occurs after you've left the room, and that's what we're going to describe today. We're going to shift from talking about what a library does when the library is, so to speak, in the room, to what is actually happening when the library is no longer in the room. And the key way to do this is, as I say, this differentiation of wants versus needs. I have never ever worked with a librarian who did not at some point in their career, or probably even in their day, have the thought that their client or their stakeholder doesn't know what they want. The stakeholder, him or herself, doesn't know what he or she wants. So you've always been in this situation, I'm sure this has happened to most, if not all of you, that you have somebody come to you saying, I need this information, or I need this research, or I need an answer to this question. And when you are explaining, or when they are explaining to you what they're doing there, you start to realize that what you're asking me is not actually going to solve your problem. You don't really understand what you want. I'm going to take a consultative approach. All of this is well and good. I don't see any problem with this, but I do suggest an alternative view to the situation, which is that your clients know perfectly well what they want. What your clients don't know is what they need. So let's focus on that difference for a little bit. So as we said, the client identifies a problem, they identify a gap in their knowledge, and once they realize that they have this gap in knowledge, they feel the need to come to you to fill in that gap in knowledge. So they're sitting there saying, I need to work on this project, I need to complete it. If I had this information, then I could do that. I don't have the information. Let me go to the experts on information. So they've self-diagnosed in terms of, this is my gap. They come to you and say, I have this project that I'm working on, so I need this information, or I need the specific or particular bit of research, and they're telling you about the research that they need. Here's the difficulty. They're talking to you in your realm. This is your castle. You are the king of this castle. And they're trying to tell you what they need in your castle, what they need in terms of information. But they're not experts on information. You are experts on information. So of course, when they're speaking to you in this area, it sounds like they don't know what they want because they're trying to talk about your expertise. If you can move them back a step into the problem and the project that they're working on, this is their castle. They are the kings of this castle right here. And the outcome that they want from that, that's their area of expertise. They know the project that they're working on. They know the solution that they want, the specific outcome that they want to happen. This is their area of want. The middle, where you work, is their area of need. That's really the difference between wants and needs. And when you can differentiate them that way, then you can focus on the fact that your clients do know what they want. They have a very good understanding of what they want. They don't always know what they need. You know what your clients need, because what they need is your expertise. It's your castle. It's your solution. So you need to be the expert there. So the secret is clients know what they want. They want their work. They want their products, their projects. They want the recognition that comes with good work. All of those things, whatever the success of their particular work or project is, that's all within their castle. They know their wants better than you know their wants. But in order to achieve those wants, they need information. And again, that is your castle. That is your expertise. So what they need is the thing that you do better than what they do. When your clients try to tell you what they need, they're going to get it wrong because they're not the experts in the information you are. That's the key difference between wants and needs. So let me refresh what we saw before, and let's take a look at that, thinking about this difference between wants and needs. So if you're operating here in the middle where you offer a solution, but you're responding to a need that happened one step before, right? So your client was working on something and, as I say, said, okay, I have this gap in knowledge. Let me call the experts in knowledge. So the first thing you want to do is think about what was happening in that step right before they called you. What made them think that your solution or your service was the thing that they need? Then, once you figured that out, go one step further, one step back again. How did the problem present itself? Why were they fine doing their work and then all of a sudden realized, okay, to go forward or to do this well or to do this better, I've come across an obstacle that I need to overcome. So what was that obstacle? How did it present itself? How did they notice the problem or the lack of information? What do they want to happen instead? And then go back one step further even from that. Before the problem has even presented itself, the client is working on a project or a situation. And as I say, they know from the beginning what outcome they want. So before they even realize that there's a gap in knowledge or a gap in information, what are they thinking about right there? How do they want to tackle this project? What do they want to happen? How are they picturing that it will go in order for it to go smoothly? So from the moment they come and talk to you about your solution, can you move 3 steps back from that to understand what is happening at your client's desk in that moment, 3 steps before they've even picked up the phone or come to speak to you? Can you understand their expectations and what they hope for in an outcome long before you've even entered the room? If you understand that, you can deliver a success option for after you've left the room. So understanding the problem and the desired outcome means that you will understand what should happen way over here on the end when you have left the room and they are delivering success. So in short, you could say, what is happening every time you're not in the room, before you enter and after you leave? And if you understand those 2 instances, then you're understanding what your client wants. The needs are what happens when you are in the room. And that's the key difference. That's a lot of information. This might be a good point to pause and see if there are questions or comments or different views on this with what we've looked at so far. So the difference between tasks and values, and the difference between needs and wants of what your clients are doing. Do we have any questions on that?
We don't have questions yet. I'll wait to see hands or chats that people want to. We do have some great comments coming on the chat, which is wonderful because we haven't had that before. And one of the comments is that, so someone in a corporate research center, they're using personas, and they're starting to use personas to drive solutions from a customer's point of view. It helps them visualize and see what may be able to address life to make it easier for the client. And this has been tied to a specific offering. And I responded to them, Rebecca, and just said, like, that's excellent, because it's when we are really living the client's life to understand what the client has to get done.
Yeah.
Jobs to be done theory, which is not a theory. That's really the thing that people most value. And I know that we have academic libraries on here too. Whether it's a student or a faculty member or a client in a corporate research or whatever it is, they have stuff they need to get done, a job they need to get done. And the more that we understand what that job is and how we can accelerate their ability to get that done, or as you've been talking about, help them overcome, the various barriers to accomplishing that, that's what they truly value.
Yeah.
The next thing I had here was, just a minute, we also had, just after you started and you were talking about, looking at it from the client's point of view, and also talking about the issues that libraries have. We had someone talk about their campuses and that they have a campus-wide alignment ongoing right now with analysis by appointed task force of 12 people, none of whom is from the library or really understands the library.
Yes.
Bad.
Yes.
No. Bad. Very, very concerning. So others, I'm going to unmute everybody. I know that's a risky, but I'm going to anyway, just in case they want to speak. Oops.
While you're doing that, a quick comment on the personas. That's a really good approach to create a three-dimensional understanding of your client. It has to go beyond just their information needs, as I say. And so a persona is another great tool. And again, that's used in business and marketing and makes so much sense in this environment as well, to understand, go beyond very much how your client uses your product, but also go beyond the demographics of your client, go beyond just the standard description, but to look at the environment in which your client is working, what the expectations are on your client. We'll get into to that a bit more, but the point is the persona, that word persona, actually, it means person, and it wants to create a full view. So usually a customer persona is several pages long and really describes somebody in their day-to-day life and allows you to get that much more comprehensive understanding of their environment.
So what else are people doing to better understand what the students, faculty, clients, customers are really trying to accomplish?
This is Jean Kaufman at Eastman Chemical. Part of our reference interview does include the concept of why is this needed? What is the project? Let us better understand the background and what it is you need. So I feel like we are working on that. But the last step, your circle here on client has a problem. Like I said, we're trying to understand that. But we are very poor at the third step. Client uses this solution, and what is their success? And it would be great if we had that captured, because when it comes to explaining how our services were useful. That's very important.
Yeah, the problem is what spurs them to come to you. So there's obviously great value in understanding that, but the outcome is what determines this was a good experience or a bad experience. So understanding the problem is half of it, as you say, but then understanding what success looks like for your client is the other half. And when you have both of those, then you're really working towards a solution-driven service. Then you're really working towards the success of your client, not just the success of the library. Yeah.
Right.
Excellent.
I know, Rebecca, that many organizations and many librarians and consultants find it difficult to do that follow-up with people. Are you going to talk about that in the last half, or can I ask you to talk a bit about that now in terms of finding out how the client uses a solution?
So I'll talk a little bit about that now, because there are two sides to that. There's how you gain that understanding. So literally, what are the questions that you ask? You know, it's how do you how do you put yourself into your customer's shoes? It's not that simple. And that's what we're going to go through in the second half of this webinar. But the other side of it is, at what point does that happen? And it's all great and good to do all the exercises. There's a lot that you can do at your desk with the library, with the information team, do brainstorming to go into this. But all of it has to be proven. Ultimately, you have to get that feedback and get that information from the clients and the stakeholders themselves. Otherwise, it's assumptions. You might find that your assumptions are all correct, and that's great, but you have to prove your assumptions. That part is, what I find for many libraries is there's some obvious touch points that you can use with intake requests, and there's some formal meetings that happen. Trainings are also an opportunity. Remember, training, when you have somebody in front of you and you're training them on new software or tools, or just giving them a tour of the library, that's a touch point. But there are also a lot of less formal touch points. And when you start to examine all the times throughout the course of a day or a week that you interact with different stakeholders, you'll find that there are a lot of them there. And so the key is, when you are interacting with your stakeholders, and especially when you're talking about a project, can you always be asking questions that are about them and never about you? Can you make sure that all the questions that you ask are not about content? That's a bit of a challenge for you, but when you're having those touch points, ask questions, get that feedback, but try to make sure that no.
Oh. Rebecca, are you there?
Yes, I am. I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, sorry. I muted. Something was starting to happen on someone's end, and I immediately muted everyone, not realizing that that, of course, muted you.
Oh,
My apologies, everyone. Sheesh. Oh.
Do I have to repeat?
You might want to repeat what you just said.
Just the very end. The point of when you do talk to when you do get that feedback from your stakeholders and from your customers, ask questions that are always about them and never about the library. So don't ask questions about content, don't ask questions about information or alerts, only ask questions about their projects and what they're doing. And as I say, it's a bit of a challenge to do that, but prepare your questions in advance and make sure that they're never actually about you and they're always about your client. So back to that business mantra, it's not me, it's you. Ask the questions about your audience.
Great. Okay. Do you want to continue on?
Sure. This takes us nicely into the other side of that. So there's the direct feedback from your customers, and then there's the information that you can put together so that you can understand your customers. And this is an exercise that I do with a lot of my clients to really start to break that down. Splitting out what the clients need, what the clients want, and what the clients fear. And the want part in the middle here, we're going to go into more depth in that. Doing it in this order is helpful because what the customer needs is the easiest of these three questions. What your customer needs is what you do. This is your area of expertise as information professionals. So if you think of the schema above, that's that middle point. That's where you are working and you are serving them. So discussing what a customer needs is the easiest answer. But because I don't like to make anything too easy, I always suggest doing this with a bit of a twist, which is to describe what your customers need without ever using any of your industry jargon. So a little bit similar to when you talk to your customers, ask about them, not about your work. Can you describe the services that you provide without ever using words like library, content, information, current awareness, alerts, news, all of this, I will say jargon that is everyday language to you, but is not necessarily to your customers. Now, on that note, I realize that news is an everyday word. It's not a jargon word, but when it's being used in the library, it's an industry word. So all of these words, even if they are completely mainstream terminology, as long as they are industry words when you are working, avoid them, sort of cross them off your list and describe what you do. So describe what the customers need without using any of those words. This is hard to do, and that's the whole point. Your first try will not be your final try. Work through it. It can be a little bit frustrating, but also very exciting when you get to it. And I think, Rebecca Jones, actually, I think you use something similar to this or use this as part of what you do as well. I've heard you speak and talk about sort of similar exercises. It's very refreshing when you do succeed and come out the other side. It does give you a really new point of view on your work. So the first step is describe your customer needs without using your own industry jargon. Then describe what your customer wants. And as I say, in a moment, I'm going to break down how you can do this with some more tips. But essentially, in short, a successful project for your client, what does that look like? What difference does information make in the success of that project? And as I said before, what are they thinking before they call you? And what are they hoping happens after they've used your service? That's your customer wants in short. And I like to add the customer fears as well. And that means, what are they afraid of in terms of something going wrong, in terms of not doing the right thing or not getting the right information, or maybe even not doing anything. If they decide, I don't need any additional content, this is what I have is fine. So all of the risk basically that they could encounter with this project, what is the fear associated with that? What would happen if something does go wrong? If you do that side of it, the fears as well, that helps you understand your clients more closely too. It gives you, again, a slightly different perspective on them and the vulnerabilities that they might be facing. So I said that the client wants can be further broken down. So their area of expertise. So client needs are your area of expertise. Client wants are their areas of expertise. And a way to look at this, a way to make this simple, is when we look at those definitions of what a librarian does, and we change the heading from what a librarian does to what patrons want, none of your patrons are ever going to use this terminology. None of your clients is ever sitting there thinking, I really hope that somebody's collecting and optimizing information for me. And they certainly aren't sitting there saying, I want somebody to work in a library. So none of those definitions are actually what your clients are thinking. And really, to put it very directly, what they care about in of itself. This is how you understand what they do, what you do, but it's not how they understand what you do. So how can you place yourself in your customer's shoes so that you can see how they understand the value that you bring? We've already established that you know the value that you bring in your organization. The struggle is to articulate it in a way that really resonates with them. So with all that in mind, let's look at how you can break it down and really understand what your customers are dealing with when they're working on their own projects. So thinking about customer wants, we can look at the 3 different areas of what a customer wants. And the first one is what the customer wants in terms of business outcomes, what they want to happen in terms of their own business results. Now, the universal in here is, how does this affect their bottom line or the organization's bottom line, and how does this affect their success? So what does your client want to happen in terms of organizational success and their project success? And then you can start to go further. What does that mean? What is considered success for this particular project or this particular effort that they're working on. How would the project look if information weren't a part of it, if they didn't have access to your expertise? Also think about how the project itself or the outcome itself is going to be judged internally, how it's going to be reviewed, how it's going to be rewarded, recognized. You can think about, if this is a project that they're working on, the very next project meeting, what's going to happen in that meeting? What is the deliverable at that point? What are the expectations that are put on your client's shoulders? So what are the outcomes that your client wants that are specifically about business results? That's the first thing to understand. And this is, again, understanding those wants in terms of the project they're working on and the successful outcome of that project, like we saw before. But we can go deeper and get an even deeper understanding of everything that goes into what your client is doing. So we've got the business wants. What are the technical wants? Now, again, in its shortest sense, technical wants are always how you save time and money. You should never stop at saving time and money. So very simply, everything you do should in one way or another be saving time and money or increasing time and increasing money. But that on its own is a very weak value proposition because a lot of things save time. Not doing it also saves time. So you always want to go beyond that. What's the value add of the way that time was saved or the way that money was either saved or increased? And again, this is your area of expertise. So what are the technical wants? What do they want in terms of their use of information? So this is where you describe your contributions to the project. And again, without using the industry jargon, like we mentioned above. So your clients, if your clients were describing what they want from their use of information, how are they describing it? And then finally, what are your clients' personal wants? And again, this is a little bit like client fears. This gets you more into the mind of your client, not at work, but as a person. So this could be things like, if I nail this project, I get a promotion. I'm going to get public recognition. I get to be the team lead on the next project. It might even be, if I can do this well, I get to clock off in time to see my son's soccer game. There are a lot of different things that your clients want on a more personal level in terms of what they want themselves out of this project, out of their working environment, in terms of their own success. Basically, what makes the client happy? What makes that individual happy in the way that he or she is working? Now, when you break it down into this way, into these three areas, this helps you walk through step by step everything that your client has to consider. And it makes sure that you are really addressing all aspects of your customer wants. So this is a very effective way to basically step out of your own shoes and step into your client's shoes. The trick here is that your clients themselves, the people you're serving, whoever they might be, I'm using clients as a sort of simple catch-all, they might not be doing this level of analysis for themselves. They probably aren't. Nobody's sitting there making a list of our own business, technical, and personal wants every single day. So it might not even be so explicit to them if you ask them directly. But if you ask them the right questions about what's going on, what are the pressures, what are the expectations, what do you hope will happen, you'll be extracting this type of information. So once you understand business wants, technical wants, and personal wants, now you really understand your client and you've really moved beyond or outside of yourself and the service that you provide, and you're talking in your client's language. So far, so much information. What we've done up until now is essentially look at what you do and completely deconstruct that, right? So we started with some standard definitions of what a library or a librarian does, and we started to break that down. Deconstruct, removing all the different parts, removing your jargon, first of all, and then really all the different parts of what you do. And almost like you are deconstructing your castle and you're walking around the back, you're looking at it from a whole new perspective. So what I'm wanting to be happen here, if you do this exercise for yourself step by step, then at this point, you have a very different, a very fresh view of your own work. You're seeing it through a different terminology, through a different lens. That's a lot of insight there into the greater efforts that are happening all around you and how you contribute to those. Great. Now we have to reconstruct it all. So we've deconstructed, Now we have to put this all back together so that we can use this new information, this new point of view to tell the story of your value. So now that we know what your clients do value, what resonates with them, we need to position your work and describe your work with that language in this way that does resonate with that audience. So the purpose of everything so far was to learn to speak your customer's language. Now let's turn this into that internal message that you can use that really resonates with them, that's going to capture their interest. And so that in a few words, you can be telling your customers, your reporting line, your partners, whoever your stakeholders are, what it is that you do in terms of how it affects them. It's something that's going to make them say, oh, I want more of that. I'm using the pillars of service terminology here. I've seen different approaches to this. And pillars of service is done by Jinfo Consulting, which some of you surely are familiar with. It's a system that I find very simple to use and very valuable, so I'm sharing it with their permission. What it does is it reorders all the information department tasks, activities, and deliverables, so all the things that you do day to day, and reorganizes them into 3 up to 5 very simple value statements that allow you to describe your work in terms of output instead of in terms of tasks. So whether you use this approach or other approaches, the goal is always to reorganize your work in terms of value, not what you do, but why you do it. So this first one is a fairly traditional view of information department services. So you've got these 3 columns and you recognize research services, current awareness, vendor management, and within that, all of the tasks that are related to those key services. So again, this is from the Jinfo model specifically. This is a fairly standard, still effective way to describe what an information department or library does. But if we shift that and turn it into a solution-driven description, then we get something that looks like this, and this example is for a pharma company. But look at the headers that we have here at the top, and think about how these will connect with stakeholders in a way that current awareness does not. So think of the difference between research services and let scientists focus on science. Think of the difference between vendor management and maximize every penny of a purchasing budget. These are sentences that right away will capture the attention of the people you're serving, the people you're reporting to, and the people you want to support. When they read that, they can then go into each column and they see all the underlying tasks. Now they're starting to understand how the what you do actually connects to the value. You're making it very easy for them to create that connection themselves, to really understand what the difference is and why they care about things like research and current awareness, etc., because it's serving these greater purposes. So again, this is part of the screenshot here is part of the Jinfo model, which is part of their subscription. So if you have a subscription, you can see it. How can you do this for yourself? Well, once you've examined your clients in depth, you can now list out everything that you do in terms of why you do it. So we understand it from the client's point of view, what impact it has, what would happen if you didn't do it. And then you can redescribe those services and re-put them together in terms of these pillars of service, or think of them as pillars of value, leading with the why you do it. We do all of these things because they bring to this greater outcome for our organization. I always like to end everything with a TLDR because we go through a lot of material. So how do we summarize everything we have looked at today? So we started with looking at what you do and pointing out that, yes, it matters to you, but it does not express value to your audience. Even though you know with those few descriptions how valuable they are, it's not communicating that. So as long as you're talking about current awareness or news or research, you'll still be in an uphill battle to get a seat at that table with a capital T. So how do we break that down and change the way you express what you do? Oh, very quickly, TLDR, apologies, too long, didn't read. So if you ever see TLDR in an email, it means that somebody's saying, summarize. So I'm summarizing here. So the first thing we do is understand the difference between what the customers want and what the customer needs and why that matters. Then we look to describe what they want by understanding their business, technical, and personal wants in those 3 areas. And then finally, we use that information to describe your own work. So we're focusing on the outcomes for the organization. Customer-centric means not talking about you, not focusing on what's in it for you. It means knowing your client, and it means applying your expertise to their outcome. So the most common thing I've heard in libraries is the difficulty in getting a seat at the table with a capital T. If you speak your client's language, you will start to come out from the shadows and you will eventually get that seat at the table. You will indeed be invited to that table through understanding your customer success and your customer desired outcomes. And that takes me to my thank you page.
Wow, that's amazing. In fact, I think that was one of the best I've ever heard, Rebecca. Thank you very much in understanding what it is that we're actually bringing to the party so that we're invited to the bigger party.
Yeah.
So somebody, my apologies, I don't have the name, but put up that this is very much like an elevator speech about elevator pitch. Would you like to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Yes. So there are a lot of views on the elevator pitch. There are those who say it's a sales tool, and therefore it has this very particular function. There are those who say, oh, it's about sounding good. So I think the elevator pitch sort of gets unfair bad press. Ultimately, the elevator pitch is whatever you want it to be. The point is, how do you describe what you do in the time that it takes you to journey in an elevator? That's all that means. So I take a very neutral view to that. And I am perfectly happy for you to think of this as an elevator pitch. And that's exactly, really picture that experience. You end up in an elevator with the CEO of the company or the dean of the university or somebody of great importance, and you get this opportunity to position yourself and your team in a way of value, and you've got just those few seconds that you're in the elevator. What do you say? What do you say that attracts their attention? If you create a message that is brief and driven by the outcomes, driven by the solutions, then you have an effective elevator pitch. Whatever your goal is with that pitch, it doesn't have to be a sales pitch. So yeah, I think it's a very acceptable way to think about this.
Great. Are there other questions from people or comments? I'm unmuting you all. There, you can talk. So what's one new concept that you heard, or a concept that you know, but Rebecca articulated it in a slightly different way that either furrowed your brow or makes you think a little bit more? Kendra?
Okay. Well, I had, I guess one of the concepts that really resonated with me was it's not me, it's you, and speaking about value. But then that made me question, because I'm going through a realignment process myself at my institute with the library, and trying to explain the value of the sort of information infrastructure work that we do, so that when we do have clients come to us with projects, that we have the tools in place.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak to that at all?
Well, can you explain the question? Sorry.
So I think, like, I understand. I think the value proposition of working with clients on projects is pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, letting scientists do their
Right.
focus on the science, or we can save time and money. But then sort of all of the services that a lot of information centers need to have to upkeep the tools for that work. Or, like, I know for me, handling publications and making sure that our research is archived and accessible.
Right.
There's the nebulous value proposition of, well, that will maintain our position and prestige within the industry.
Yes.
But I feel like that's just, like, I really struggle communicating the value of that to my stakeholders.
So those things that don't directly touch them, but they're things that you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't directly touch a client, it all serves to make your department effective, which serves to serve your clients well. So an example that I've come across on this is a filing system. I've worked with clients who, like, their big initiative for the year or for a particular period was to completely update the way they filed all their documentation. And by the way, I have seen this happen, exact thing with filing, both in information departments, and I've had a couple small businesses that had the same situation. So filing doesn't directly affect clients at all. But what happened was, what it meant was that it was making all of the documentation about clients, about services, everything that is key, easier to find. It was increasing productivity, and it was also diminishing the repetition of questions to clients, because it meant that internally within the team, information was more accessible. So just things ran more smoothly. If two different people ended up answering the phone from the same person calling on 2 different days, there was still continuity because they could easily see what was happening. So the things that you're doing sort of internally on the back end, if you will, are always there to serve a purpose in terms of how you perform all of your duties. So connecting those dots, really going from, well, this is going to be an improvement, or this makes us successful because it affects all these other things, all go into that story. And those things are important too. So even those things like, maintaining basically everything that's in the background means that you always provide a high value service, or, that time isn't wasted and money isn't wasted and resources aren't wasted, and that communication is done well, and that the experience is easy for your stakeholders, et cetera. So you can still connect those things to the value proposition in terms of what front-facing function is this supporting. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thank you, Kendra, for letting me pick on you. Anyone else? There is, Deborah has been posting some interesting things to the chat about the fact that the librarians who are not subject specialists sometimes find it a barrier to become more involved in the faculty to which they're assigned. Did I get that right, Deborah? Where are you?
Yes, Rebecca, that's right. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It took me a while to find the button to unmute myself.
Okay, good.
This is Laura Walesby. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Laura.
I really appreciated the pillars of service and how you reframe that from kind of an internally focused, librarian focused, task focused type of list to almost, a marketing
Right.
pamphlet. But it really helps if you can reframe your work like that. I think it, like you said, it helps get a seat at the table. I'm interested in, somebody wrote, in how people gather information about what their clients want or need. We've done some surveys and focus groups. I'm interested if that persona, somebody talked about creating personas, if that yielded any unique insights. Or if there are other tips in that regard.
If I can just say something, we very often do this with libraries, and we ask for, a 10-minute talk with a client or a faculty member. And we ask them 3 basic questions. What do they have to accomplish? What do they have to deliver in the next quarter or the next year, whatever the timeline is? What are their biggest problems in delivering those? And is there anything that they think the library, the research specialist, whatever it is, could do to help that? And we ask that because we want to know what they're really focusing on and the jobs that they need to do and what problems are. And the third question about the library or the librarians is really to get a sense of what their perception is, what the starting point is for the librarians to be able to go from there. The thing that always gives me cold chills is when constantly I hear librarians asking people what they really need. Let's really understand what they need. They don't know what they need. They need to get a job done. They need to get something done. So that's what we've had great success over the past 30 years doing, is really understanding what people need to accomplish in a given period of time. That's why I say like 4 months, you know, a quarter, half a year, whatever their goals are, and that they're being held accountable for, and what the biggest problems are for them to do that. And then it's up to the librarians to determine how they can best intersect, as Rebecca said, to come with a solution.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Because they're not responding to surveys, so
Yeah,
a
no,
10-minute conversation is great.
right. Everybody will give you 10 minutes. It's amazing. If they won't, that's fine. Keep on.
Right.
Right.
And remember that people like to talk about themselves ultimately. So again, when you're asking questions about them, they'll answer.
They do. Anybody else? Well, first of all, we had chat, which is terrific. Secondly, we had some discussion, which is even better. And, and there we are. For those of us who work as independent consultants, sometimes we work as a subcontractor, right? Who has no interaction with the client. How can we best communicate when an actual reference interview never happens, Rebecca?
Oh goodness, that sounds like there's layers there. Unpeel the onion. There's, especially when you're starting doing something new. So, you're trying to find a new way to communicate, etc. Always start with the easiest option, really. Who do you have access to? What communication channels can you use? Part of that is also thinking about what have you not tried yet, and it's worth trying. There might be a really easy solution out there that just hasn't been tried yet. So it's okay, I think, at first to sort of throw the stuff against the wall and see what sticks. Without testing, you just don't know really what's going to work. So when there are layers like that, when you don't have direct access to the people who can give you the best information, focus on what you do have access to. But again, ask questions about them. So you can sort of work your way through, I think, layers of people, layers of communication, layers of bureaucracy, whatever it is, because everybody has self-interest. And I don't mean that in the negative way of self-interest. The point is that everybody has an expectation put on their shoulders. There's something that some way that they are being judged or reviewed, or, that their success is being determined.
Right.
So follow that thread for each person, make it always about them to sort of get through to the next layer. But again, people will talk about themselves, and if you are making their life easier, so the more you're understanding what pressures are on their shoulders, and you're in any way helping to alleviate those, more and more doors will start to open, or they'll start to open more and more every time.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. And the people that you're talking about with the pressure are the actual original contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that they need to deliver? And Laura, thank you very much, has just posted the link to Strategizer, to their value proposition canvas. Strategizer, if you haven't looked at their website before, do give it some time. It is a fabulous tool. And so my thanks, Rebecca. I can't thank you enough. I think Rebecca's going to be back in the spring, right, with a 3-parter. Is that right,
there's
Rebecca?
been talk, hasn't there? Yes. Yes.
Fantastic. And you're just such a great presenter. And you do this from a librarian's thinking and education, but a non-library approach. And I think that's so important. So thank you so much. This will be recorded, as I said, and posted. And thank you to LMD for letting us do a little pilot project here using Zoom. So thanks, Rebecca. You have a great day.
Thank you. Same to you, and same to everyone. Thanks for participating. I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.